You may have played poker, but playing poker in Texas is a different animal. This is the Texas Poker Podcast with Tyler and Clint.
Hello, this is the Texas Poker Podcast. I'm Tyler. This is Clint.
What's up, y'all?
And we are back with episode 31.
Episode 31. And episode 30, we ended with making people money. The bet on the Indianapolis Colts, it was easy the entire game. There wasn't even really a sweat. I think the Jets came back and scored to 30, but really it was at the very end where the money line winner, and I'm sure they covered as well, was a really easy wins.
I mean, it was the easiest $11 I ever got.
See, someone was complaining that, I'm betting 50 to only win 11. What's going on? This is horrible. You know what? Your next lunch, I paid for it, man.
Yeah, I mean, can't argue with that.
So I was definitely happy. I'm kind of, I've been playing with the sports betting. Like, it's basically hitting that kind of thing that poker did in Texas. Like, poker was not really profitable ever in a day because you just had it was just being raked too hard. And no matter how good you are, if it's raked hard enough, you're just not going to be profitable. And I feel like sports betting is kind of getting to the point where it was very, very hard to generate anything. And now, I'm not saying you can be a long-term winner, but I see where it's maybe a possibility. It's been a fun experiment, I will say that.
Nice, but probably a more fun experience is I think you had a massive session this week, huh?
Oh, man. So, you and anybody who listens to this podcast know that I've been on the downswing from hell. I had a great Vegas trip where I was doing real well, just ran really good, came back, won some more sessions, and I was just making a tear of it, and then that downswing just hit me in the balls. It was just so bad. So I had finally started stringing together a couple little wins. The 5-5 heads up. The over at Texas Central, I had like a $250 win. So I was stringing them together. I was like, finally, it's nothing big, but you're like, just let me see something profitable. I go into Texas Avenue one night. I have the entire night to just do whatever. And I go there, and they have one table. We're watching the Astros in the World Series. That didn't go so well. And for an hour and a half, I'm card dead. The hands I'm getting in are just, I'm not making anything. There's no gigantic losses, but just misses. There's multi-way pots, so there's not really a lot of ways to just take it down bluffing or anything like that. And I'm just like, here we go again. This seems to be my status quo anymore. And then I hit a set, got paid on it, started making a little run up. And then I get kind of an interesting hand. I get pocket aces. It goes 30 and then gets called 3 ways.
Did you open a 30? Oh, no, it got 30. Someone else opened a 30, got called 3 ways, and action's on you now?
Yeah, action's on me now. I'm like, okay, normally I'd probably make this like 100, 110, or maybe 120. But then I'm like, okay, the way this table goes, it's going to get one caller, and then it's just going to string everyone around. And then, I'm playing pocket aces in this bloated multi-way pot that's, if it comes like 7, 8, 9, it's just a disaster. So I'm like, okay, whatever. If I take it down pre-flop, it's fine. I make it 200.
I like 200 a little bit more anyway. I was kind of thinking about it a second. I like 200 more than 110.
Yeah, I thought it was a huge bet at the time. Gets called 3 ways. One guy shoves all in for about 200, and then it gets 2 callers as well. And one guy's like, he goes to tank call, and he's like, you got a big hand or whatever. I'm bluffing. He's like, you don't bluff and everything.
There you go.
And then he calls $200. This is why I don't bluff. This is because you're like, you don't get action. You won't get action if you don't bluff. I don't know. The $200 pre-flop at a 1-3 game seems like a lot of action. So here I am in this god-awful kind of spot again. I got 3 people in the pot, and we're looking at like an $800 pot, and gets a flop, and I think it was queen 10. I remember the exact flop.
That's kind of a dicey flop right there for aces.
It is a dicey flop. I mean, here is the only saving grace. Like when I started the hand, I only had like 630, maybe 650.
Okay, well then decision's made easy.
Yeah, I mean, so basically I'm just jamming everything here. So I mean, I'd already made the decision, unless it was just the flop from hell. Actually, I'm not even sure there's anything I don't jam.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah.
In that situation, yeah, I think just...
I mean, if somebody outflops me, they outflop me.
Yeah.
So I had pretty much already decided I'm just jamming everything. Jam, they both kind of tank fold.
Okay, well, that's nice.
I don't think either one really had anything. I think they just were at a $200 pre-flop and didn't want to let it go, but it was, and then the other guy who was all in, shows pocket kings, and I think I reran it twice, and it was clean both runouts.
Oh, that's very nice. How were you anticipating that king?
I was. I mean, when you're running bad, I just knew the 2-outer was coming. I'm like, at best, I chop the pot. 100% that's my best. I mean, it doesn't even shock me if it's king on one run out and king on the other. So, yeah, it was I was really fortunate to win that pot. I was like, oh, thank God. And from there, it was at that point, I'm stacked not the biggest stack for 1-3, but way bigger than I have been for a while. So I was really fortunate.
For me, also, like, after you win a hand like that and you get so deep stacked, but it's also that relief of it's not all your money. I feel like you can kind of play, like, you're knowing the correct move. Knowing the correct move and doing it is a lot easier whenever you're up. For me, at least. I mean, obviously, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Well, just the stress of, especially on a down, like, even more so when you're on a downswing. I mean, it's 100% all the time, but when you're on a downswing, and it really takes the stress off.
Definitely if that downswing because I've been on downswings where I start making the incorrect move because I'm worried about the variance sometimes. Or not basically the variance sometimes. And that to me is more frustrating whenever it starts taking a toll and you're not playing as well as you know you can play.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah. Oh, I've talked about it before on this downswing. Like, I've been running bad, but I have not been playing the greatest either. There's been several sessions that should have been either lesser losses or even wins that I was not playing my best. I mean, I was tilted before I even sat down at the table.
I'm talking about more like I've been on such a bad downswing where I only like flat called with ace king whenever I could have put in I think it was a 4-bet. But as you know how I play,
yeah.
I mean, that means it's taking a pretty big toll on me.
Oh yeah, the way you even more so than me, and me as well. Like when you're playing ace king that way, you know you're playing scared.
Exactly, and that's whenever it really started kind of bothering me. I mean, yeah, that relief of doubling up like that and seeing some green really takes a load off.
Oh yeah, it's Now the only thing here is I was very nervous because I knew I needed kind of a big session, and I just had this. So I'm like, oh god. So the one other hand on here is a PLO hand, which you want to talk about scare the shit out of you. I mean, you've been on a downswing. You're now stacked very well. The easiest way to lose all that is on that reverse button PLO hand.
I mean, if I'm in your situation, I don't even know if I look at the cards.
Well, I did.
Okay.
So I forget the other two cards. I did have a suited ace of diamonds. I remember that. And I think it's one of those. It was like I called 3, and then someone made it 20, 25, and there's call. And I'm like, well, I got outs to the nuts. What do I do here?
Call.
Yeah, and, I ended up making the call. I flopped the nut flush draw. I think somebody was actually all in as well on this. I check. Someone bets a pretty sizable amount into the... I think they bet pot. The other guy calls, and I'm like, son of a bitch. I just got this stack. I mean, what happens when on the river? But I'm like, well... I was like, well, I go ahead and make the call for the suit, and then the diamond instantly hits, and giving me all the nuts except for a straight flush, and I had one of the outs to the straight flush. Oh. So it was and the other guy in the hand jams all in immediately. I'm like, well, I call, and sure enough, I got the nuts at that point, and it stays clean.
Oh man, I bet you were just skipping out of there.
Oh God, you and me were texting, and you're like, if there's ever a time to leave, I'm like, I ain't leaving, but oh God, I ain't playing all my head. You're looking at a 5% range here right now.
It's like, I'm just watching a movie. Just a guy watching a movie at a poker table.
Yeah. This is where you break out the 10-inch iPad. You don't even have the 7-inch iPad out there. So then you want to talk about weird table dynamics. Here I am on busting out of one of the biggest downswings I've ever had. I now have 2,000 in front of me. I'm in for 300. And I'm like, oh, thank God. Well, there's this guy who plays very big. And he's kind of a gambler, and he's a gambler who does know poker. And he goes and sits directly to my left. Whatever. Okay. I mean, he's been running bad. He's not got that big of a stack or whatever. Me and him have had a history. We're friendly, but we've gotten into it a time or two before. I mean, we're not. I by no means consider him someone I don't like. He's a good guy to play with, but I also think that some of what he does is on the shadier side. And I've been known to call it out sometimes when I see it. So he and the dealer get into it. He's like, he gets dealt his cards, and then he's like, I'm going to straddle. The dealer's like, well, you can't straddle. You already have your cards and everything. He's like, I haven't looked, so I'm going to straddle. Dealer's like, I can't verify that. This seems like a very good... this seems like a very correct ruling, right?
The only time I've ever seen it go the other way is if somebody says that they're an automatic straddle every hand no matter what.
Right.
Other than that, because you agree, if they say that to the table when the dealer sits down, they've already announced it to the table, they do straddle every hand no matter what.
Yeah.
That would be fine, right?
I think if you put it in those terms and you just say it's an automatic straddle, but what if it's somebody who's been known to straddle?
They cannot.
Yeah, I was like, because that's kind of this would be kind of in between. He has never said that, but he does straddle a lot better. And for the record, I do believe he didn't look at his cards. But I jumped on him. I was like, well, you can't do that. And then he got very pissed off. And I was like, okay, regardless if you looked at your cards or not, if he makes that ruling for you, he's got to make that ruling for every single person. And do you think there's not one person in the world who would not lie about this?
100%. It seems very reasonable.
I thought it was the most reasonable. I think he was kind of tilted and getting into it. So I was like, yeah, you can't do that. And he's like 55, 60 maybe. Mm-hmm. And he starts like, yeah. Just making weird noises, trying to make fun of me and stuff. I'm like, oh God. If there's ever anything that makes me, watching people older than me act like spoiled children. You want to talk about lose my mind. But then I'm like, okay, don't get pissed off at me because you're running like shit.
Right.
I mean, that might have been over the line, but
Whatever. I mean, I don't know.
I've jumped over that line a time or two.
Sure.
He gets furious. He's like, "We'll see who's running like shit." He buys in. He then adds on for 2,000.
You should have said, "All right, bye," and left.
I was like, I don't care. But I tell you what, I care.
Well, no. You just said, "It's still you because I'm leaving."
Yeah, no kidding. Enjoy trying to stack the next biggest stack of the table that has 500 in front of them.
Now you got to go brush your hair.
Yeah, this hair, it's getting very unruly. But nothing really ever happened. I raised a couple times. We never really got into like a big hand or anything. But unless I had the nuts, I'm not getting into anything big. And even then, it might not stay the nuts. Still might not get into anything big. So that was a really good time, a really good session. It was one of those things because it's nice to see some green and get a little win here and there. Just be like, okay, thank God. But, that one big session really takes the load off where it makes up for some of your either really bad sessions or several of your just not great sessions.
Man, it takes a mental toll, too, sometimes. Going on such a bad downswing, you're like, do I even know what's going on? Have I been lucky my entire life? I mean...
100%. I mean, you definitely kind of start to doubt your skills when you've been running bad enough. I mean, like, there's times I know I wasn't playing that well, but there's a difference between not playing that well and, not playing and just being bad at poker.
Oh, yeah. No, definitely.
I mean...
But then there's also running bad as well. I mean, if you get into 50-50s, ace-king versus queens, versus another pair and lose. But if you string 3 or 4 of those together, that leads to a pretty bad downswing.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So it's... Because, it's just like in sports. I mean, some guy might be, not be playing that great. I'm sure, the best players have had, downs and swings where they're not doing great, but they're great players in the long run. But I tell you what, when you're going through the downswing, you wonder if you've ever... I'm like, okay, is top pair good? Or, you keep looking for leaks in your game, and which is really good. I think it's a great habit to have. But sometimes you're actually just wanting to find leaks that maybe sometimes aren't even there as well.
Yeah, sometimes your leak is just you're losing flips.
It takes a mental toll. So yeah, that's pretty much it sometimes.
So remember last week we talked about that tournament I was going to go play?
Yeah, I was super psyched about it because you don't do tournaments hardly at all. And with our work schedule, it just doesn't, we really can't do tournaments for the most part.
Yeah, like I told someone else, I think it would have taken me longer to go to the bank, get the money, and burn it than it was to lose it at that tournament.
Yeah, it did not seem, when you were texting me, did not seem to go well at all.
Well, I had some bluffs that went, actually all the bluffs went well early. I took down some mediocre hands, really didn't get into any big hands. I got into one multi-way one that kind of took a big chunk. But, basically the hand of the tournament for me was I had pocket queens and then raised too small. Got called by a ton of people. Flop came ace, queen. Oh, sorry. It was ace, queen, 10. And then what happened? And then I was out of position, so I ended up checking because I was down to probably not even 20 blinds, about 20 blinds. Okay. So I was hoping to check jam.
Right.
It checks through 8 on the turn. A guy shorter stack than me jams. I call. He has jack 9 for the straight.
And obviously no board pairing river.
Definitely not.
I don't know. I don't mind the way you played this. There weren't any hands where I thought you really horribly misplayed. I think bluffing early in the tournament I didn't really agree with because even though they went well, your chips are so valuable. Because here's in the beginning of a tournament, if you win these bluffs, it doesn't help you that much. But if you lose a decent amount of chips, it just hinders you a ton. So I wasn't keen on that, but all the hands you played, I think you played very well. I mean, someone might criticize the set of queens checking, but the vast majority of the time on that flop, it's not going to check through. Someone's going to bet, and you're going to jam.
Yeah, and I mean, the real criticism is I opened up too small. I should have made it 3 big blinds. I made it 2, which was a disaster.
Yeah. Okay, this is something that everybody seems to just be completely... Maybe I'm wrong. I study some tournament theory, but I think a lot of people just study blindly and don't actually critically think when it comes to it. And the big tournament theory is 2.5 big blinds, or raise. This is a horrible theory early in tournaments.
Right, you and I talked about that. That's better when the stacks are way shorter.
Right, because I've had people criticize, well, you're just going old school and you're not really up to times, whatever. And then I've watched them raise 2.5 big blinds the entire tournament, never steal 1 blind. Any made hands they have they're winning the actual minimum on them. I think this is horrible. I like when it's later in tournaments and you have a lot of pay jumps and there's a lot of ICM implications, then I think it definitely makes a lot of sense. But I think a lot of people just study blindly without critically thinking, and I have yet to see any math or anything that makes sense for the 2.5 big blinds earlier in the tournaments. Later in the tournaments, I do agree with it.
Yeah, but I mean, that was basically my tournament, though. I mean, I have nothing to say other than I should have made it 3 big blinds at least. I mean,
2 hours. You were there for at least 2 hours, and that's what we get. The 1 blind.
Yeah, that's my big takeaway.
Here's a question. Like, tournaments are different than cash games, but they are so different than the cash games that you play.
Right.
Do you think, like, with you running so well in cash and the cash games being so different, that it just makes sense just to not do tournaments in your shoes?
Well, figuring I cashed out, I guess the cash game after that, maybe I should just stay home. But I mean, this is gonna be a tough sell to be like, you know what, I should be doing that. But I think, I know I've studied way more cash game deep stack than I have tournaments, so I would assume I'm better at that than tournaments figuring.
100%. I guess that my question is, like, because you study, not really because you study it more, but because you do it more and you develop habits when doing it, do you think, like, if you were to suddenly start doing tournaments, it would hurt your cash game? Or, like, doing cash game at the stack levels that you do would kind of hurt tournaments?
Probably. I can agree with that. Because, I mean, early in the tournament, I mean, I just cannot resist putting in the squeeze play, the bluff, the triple barrel. I mean, yeah. Why not? It's probably going to work until it doesn't.
Well, yeah, absolutely. But yeah, I think it's different if you're in Vegas, where you can typically buy in for 100 big blinds. Or, I mean, maybe 150 or whatever. And for the most part, you're playing a lot of, like, just regular 100 times the blind. You might lose a couple hands and be playing a little bit lesser. So the differences aren't as just huge. But when you're in what we're doing, I mean, I guess you could have some deep stack tournaments where I guess you do start out with 200 something or something big blinds. I guess maybe those. But it's just ours, though, in Texas where it's match the stack. And a lot of times you're playing with, God almighty, 600-700 big blinds in front of you. It's just such a different game.
Oh, yeah, 100%. And, like, I mean, after that tournament, like I was telling you, it's just like, I was like, well, temporarily lost motivation at least to jump into another one. Gonna just keep grinding some cash.
I mean, with the way you're running in cash games and like the way you're picking things up, I mean, like I told you, if you find a way just to print money, you don't go looking for a bigger printer. You just keep you just keep doing that. I mean,
you for sure go look around, but
well, while you're looking around, you're not printing money.
Well, that's kind of the other thing, right? Is like, I mean, even when I play some of these tournaments and I make a somewhat deep run and then bubble, or make a somewhat deep run and min cash, it feels like a gigantic waste of time. Especially if you're playing bigger cash in smaller tournaments.
Oh, yeah, 100%. I mean...
Because if you're practicing tournaments and all of a sudden you play for multiple hours and you end up with a $60 profit.
Well, I always start people when they're wanting to start in poker. I always start them in tournaments because, to me, that's more fun because you can't sit there and grind a tournament. You have to play. The blinds are going up. And you get more play for your money. But as you become profitable, the cash games, because there's no really ladder for tournaments. One, the variance is so high. And then number two is the rake is kind of high for lower stake tournaments. But with cash game, I mean, here in Texas, you can not be a great player, play good, correct pre-flop ranges, and just kind of ABC poker. And at 1-2, 1-3, you're going to be a winning player.
Oh, definitely. I can agree. I mean, you got to think, when I first started, I was extremely tight and just, that's just what I did.
Yeah, and which is, I think, at that point was the correct way to play it both for what you were learning at that time and what we were buying in for.
And the bankroll. I mean,
what we were buying in for,
the bankroll, and just the knowledge, so.
Yeah, and now you're playing a whole lot deeper. But yeah, in cash game, there's a really great way to progress as a poker player that tournaments really don't have.
Yeah, I agree. But all this fun talk about cash, after the tournament, I said, you know what? I'm going to go play some cash.
Where you're good.
Sure. I mean, sure.
Yeah, history says, you're a better cash game player.
That is true.
See, I'm not going out of...
But, so, here's always an interesting situation, or not situation, but interesting dynamic, I guess, is when you play cash at the place where the big tournament is going on.
I love it.
Oh, no, I do too. But like I was telling you after that session, it was a lot of new players who were there.
Right.
A lot of new players. The first hand, I 3-bet with 3-4 suited. Flop came 5, 6, 7.
Good Lord.
Turn
lucky horseshoe up your ass?
Turn was an 8. River was a 7. Or no, sorry. Turn was a 6. And he basically boated on the river.
Oh, God. That's horrible.
Luckily, I was able to lay it down.
Did you lay this down?
Yeah, I laid it down on the river.
Oh, my God. On a 3-bet pot?
Yeah.
So you 3-bet, you flopped a straight.
Yep.
Obviously you bet.
Sorry, it must not have been. It was a big squeeze play. Sorry. It was like limp. I made it like 35 or something.
Oh, okay. It wasn't a 3-bet pot.
Sorry.
It was just a big red. Okay, I got you. It was just a bet when there was a ton of limpers.
Exactly. And it's heads up going to the flop. And I flopped the second nuts. He turns 2-pair, boats the river.
I mean, this is a really good fold here. Granted, that's a bad run out for your hand, but still so strong here. I mean, 3-4. You said it come 5, 6, 7.
Yep.
Did
an
8 hit at any point?
I don't think so. He had 6, 7. I think I misspoke earlier. He had 6, 7 because I remember he turned.
He flopped 2-pair.
Yes, because I bet gigantic on the flop. And then I bet gigantic on the turn, and then he donked the river when the board paired.
Man, dude, that's a really good... Did a flush come in at it?
Yes.
Okay. So,
And then I remember I was texting, I said, well, if I'm not folding here, am I folding anything ever?
that's true. I mean, when the board pairs and the flush comes in, that's
I mean, he bet
pretty tough.
small.
On the river?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like, how small?
I believe I made it 30, 35 on the flop. I think I made it 50 on the flop. I made it probably 85 on the turn. And then he bets like 125, 150 on the river.
Okay, so let's just ignore the limp. So 70 to the flop, and you said 50 on the flop?
Mm-hmm.
70, so we're looking at 170. And then you said, let's just go 80.
Yep.
160, 230, 330. So you bet, I bet 125 into 330.
Yeah.
God, this is a really good fold.
I mean, it was one of the ones where I actually picked the chips up and held them and was like actually thinking about it for a second. And it was one of those ones where I was like, I'm not even sure what I could be beating.
I think, I mean, you're right. It's a good fold because, I mean, if you put him on anything, it got there.
Yeah, exactly.
So, I mean, whether it's... I mean, he could flop the other part of the straight, whether he flopped with the board pairing. The river bringing was it a flop flush draw?
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with... I like this fold. I think it's a really good fold. But goddamn, that's a good fold at that point, especially heads up.
And that was the last good play I made that day. It was the first hand. So after that, that guy left, and then I was at the table with a bunch of new people who had like never played before, or live poker like that. And I did put the 3-bet in with Ace King. Heads up. I get called down by 6-4. He turns 2-pair with a 6-4 offsuit. I river an ace. I don't get stacked, but I double him up. I mean,
okay, yeah.
He was pretty short. And then I made a bad call, really. Well, I guess if my I had Jack 10 suited, and I flopped a flush draw, and he had flopped a set, and the board paired, giving me the flush draw, giving me a flush, but giving him a boat.
Oh, God, yeah. That's horrible.
So that was a very quick exit. I had not even a drink. I just sat down and left and lost the whole buy-in. I mean, about 50 minutes.
Man, this is a horrible poker day for you.
It was depressing, yeah. And that's whenever you were saying, and that's what you're good at. And I'm like, I guess. I don't know. I go a lot.
Well, cash versus tournament. I mean, that's I would definitely feel like that's your bread and butter there. I mean, it sounds like you actually played pretty well. I mean, you made a really good fold. I mean, I don't know. If you're on a flush draw and it hits and the guy just happens to have a set and the board pairs, I mean, I don't know. That's just not your day at that point.
It was not my day. I told the dealer, I appreciate what you've done to me. Bye.
Heck, I would tip you, but I need this money for Prozac.
Yeah.
How do you think, did you enjoy playing? I mean, outside of just getting crushed that day, I mean, it's been a while since we played at Prime, and seeing it is, was it kind of fun being back in another location, seeing with the tournament series going on and everything? It
was nice to, kind of like you said, see a blast from the past, like a poker room that used to be on top by miles, right? 'Cause you can agree with that. I mean, they were the first big room.
Oh, I don't think it's debatable. Yeah.
Yeah, and seeing it jam packed in there. I mean, it was packed with the tournament and the cash. I mean, they had the stream game. They had the 1-3-6 game going and a 5-5-10 game going off stream. And I don't even know how many tables there were, but the whole place was packed. And it was really cool to, like you said, see it like the old days back when that place was packed every night, 24/7.
Yeah, that's really cool. I mean, and not that I root against any of the other poker rooms. I want to see all these poker rooms do really good. But it is fun to see, kind of... it's always fun to play like in like when a tournament series is going on because there's just so much energy.
That is true. The energy, and then, I mean, the parking lot is so packed. The whole place was packed.
I mean, I guess this is why, like, when you went to New Orleans, I was like, oh, you're gonna have a blast and everything, and because I hadn't put it together that I'd only been there during the WSOP, and I just remember there like being like 30 tables going, and just everything's going crazy because I didn't do the tournament, the WSOP on a couple of those trips, and then you came back and you're like. Yeah, it was great. There was 2 tables. They barely made.
Yeah, they barely made. They said no one can watch you play. You can't eat at the table. You have to wear a mask and, don't talk to us. So
yeah, so I don't know. I just think it's cool to like play cash. I mean, I think there's better action, like a more fun environment during this tournament series. I think it's really cool.
Yeah, and then after that, we actually went and played a session together, right? We both ended up going to Prime the same time. Did we start off on the same table? We did.
Yeah, we did because I got there like 30 or 40 minutes before you, and I was like, and they had just opened that table for us, and I was like, oh, hopefully Tyler gets here because it's only like playing 6-handed or something, and I was like, well, you definitely have a full sure seat. So yeah, we started off on the same table. I was just there like 30 minutes before.
So after that tournament that I busted out of. And losing in cash, and I mean, has to be one of the shortest sessions I've ever played.
Yeah.
First hand I have Ace Jack, and the flop comes King Queen 10.
Good Lord, man! What? I mean, again, that horseshoe up your ass.
Well, so I flop it, right?
Okay.
And I bet pretty big that guy calls because there's a flush draw. The flush draw gets there on the turn, but I have the ace of hearts.
Okay.
I bet pretty big again. And then the board pairs on the river. And I believe I checked and he bet and I called, right? And that how that panned out.
I thought it went check, he bet, you bet, and he folded.
He definitely didn't fold.
Okay, I'm thinking of another hand then.
He had the set of 10s. And remember...
Oh, okay. I remember. Okay, yeah.
That was a pretty big hand to lose. That took a pretty big chunk out right there.
Yeah.
That was a rough first hand.
Wait, he had
pocket 10s.
And the board pairs on the river.
Yep.
Oh, God, yeah. I mean, I guess... Oh, yeah. I don't know.
That's just it. I mean...
Well, I mean... You bet the turn?
I believe so, because I had the ace of hearts, too.
Oh, okay. I got you. Because I was thinking, I was like, well, I mean, it seems like I have a dangerous card on the turn when the flush draw gets there. But, I mean, you're still getting value from a ton of things here. I mean, if you have ace-jack, I mean, you're getting value from king-queen, king-10, queen-10.
Still getting from pocket sets.
Yeah, other lower maybe a pair and draw. Yeah, okay, yeah, 100%. This is a great bet.
Yeah, I for sure paid him off on the river, so he didn't bet that big, luckily. And really, the lucky part is he didn't raise the flop. I mean, there was a flush draw out there, and if he raises the flop, I'm definitely re-raising.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, it's one, and then, yeah, you're re-raising. You have the nuts at that point. Mm-hmm. And he's not getting away from it. Yeah, I mean, really, this is a very easy hand that you could just either double him up or get stacked. I don't know who was the bigger stack.
Same result. Yeah, I get what you're saying. I think we're about even.
Yeah. So.
I was thinking never good when my options are double him up or get stacked. I was like, wait, what?
Well, you're right. Like, I mean, that definitely could have gone.
It really should have.
Yeah, it really should have gone more. I mean, because when you bet there.
With bottom set, you should be on a flush draw board like that. You should be raising so often. Just with bottom set, they can have so many things.
I mean, sure, you flop the straight. So I mean, it's you good check in a vacuum for that hand. But you're right. I mean, you have a ton of things that you could have here. I mean, he could be getting value from ace king, ace, a flush draw, king queen. I mean, all the same things that we thought you could get value from on the turn.
So that was one where I kind of got lucky that he didn't raise, but still took a big hit there. And then I kind of went card dead. I turned a flush, that one hand. I mean, you saw. And then I got the minimum, so that was great. I mean,
yeah.
And then basically that was it for me until you left, right? I guess I bet that guy a bunch. I tried to get him to fold pocket kings, and
I don't know, man. It seemed like you were in there just beating up people. I mean, it seemed like so many times I just saw you in a hand, and you're like just grabbing stacks, throwing. I mean, it's just like, and I mean, it seemed like you were. If you weren't making hands, you had to be bluffing a crap load. I don't know what was going on there. It was, but I know you were battling in those hands. You were definitely. I mean, because I didn't play a goddamn hand for 2 hours, and all I could do was have a rooting interest for your hands. So I definitely know there was some action going on.
Yeah, there was a lot of bluffing going on.
Was there?
Oh yeah, I mean, I showed the guy next to me when we were heads up with that one guy, who I got him to fold a ton of the time. I showed him I had king 4 of diamonds, the lucky hand, and 3-bet him. Put in the gigantic flop bet, put in the gigantic turn bet. I mean, and like I said, I guess you're just not folding. That's when I said,
oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's like, I mean, clearly this isn't going to work out for me. I mean, this looks like a dude with his mind made up.
Well, because you started off just running crappy. And then I was like, I remember texting you. I was like, because you have a history of not running well in Prime.
Yeah.
I think, to say the least. And then you had picked it up and you had started winning quite a bit by the time I left because I was frustrated. So before you even got there, this is kind of an interesting hand. I have Queen Jack. I raise. I bet. It's heads up. I flop Queen Jack immediately with a flush draw out there. I bet. He calls. So I'm like, well, there's 2 spades out there. Just don't show me a spade. 10 of spades is the next card. So he checks. What do you do here with Queen Jack?
I probably checked this behind.
I checked behind too. I was like, well,
you still have boat outs, and if you get raised, you just feel like an absolute fool.
Exactly. Kind of what I was thinking. I was like, well, I don't know what I'm. I mean, you could get value from like Queen 10 or something, but it's very specific.
Is Queen 10 calling when the flush gets there too?
2 pair probably is, I think.
Okay, I didn't know the. Okay.
Oh, it was a 10 of spades.
Gotcha. Right, gotcha.
Yeah.
No, you did. I just didn't put it together for a second. Okay.
So I check, and then behind, and the river is a 8. Giving like any 9 a straight as well. He ends up betting like 100, and he probably bets like a little over half pot, like 2/3 pot maybe. I end up making the fold. I'm like, he could have Queen Jack, Queen T. He could have another, like I could have a hand that has him beat here, but would he be betting here on such a dangerous board? Because it's basically turning it into a bluff. And then, I mean, I have blockers to a lot of the pairs, so it seems like he's more likely to be weighted to draws.
And I mean, because remember I told you that one guy, well, in this almost exact same situation, whenever, this spot I think is under bluffed a lot, basically. So I think it's a good fold.
Yeah,
that's the moral of what I was going to get to. And then I had a hand that played very similar, that session with you, where I was heads up. I bet, and the flop was, it made it to where 6-7 was the nuts, right? So it was 5-4-3, and I just bet with like, I think I had 9 deuce, something like that.
Right.
Because Clint's like standard.
Yeah.
So then
offsuit.
Turn was an 8. So then any 6 made a straight.
Uh-huh.
I barreled again. He called again. I was like, well, this is less than ideal. And then the river was another 8. And I just bet massive again. And then he turns over that he has not pocket 8s. He has trip 8s. and just says you must have the 6 and folds.
This is, I think, such an interesting hand because it's a massive fold. And at first I'm like, how in the world is he ever folding here? But, like, I mean, me and you, like you said, this is kind of under-bluffed. I mean, one of the leaks for a lot of low-stakes players is they don't bluff enough. And one of the exploits is overfolding in situations like this. So even though you bluffed him off here and it seems like a horrible fold here, maybe it is a horrible fold. It's on the cusp, but I don't know if there's a positive or negative EV play here, but I do know, like you say, when this is under-bluffed a lot, I think a lot of times somebody is going to have something that has you beat.
Yeah, I can agree. I was just shocked. I didn't even show my hand because I thought I might get attacked. So.
Yeah, that's a good call. Yeah. I mean, I know you show bluffs here and there. That's not a I'm glad you kept that one. At least, was I at the table at that point or was that after I left?
You were there.
I was there? Thanks for not showing that. I didn't want to be a part of that.
Yeah. I guess, you had another interesting hand, that 6-3 hand, before, because I was going to get into once you left, because that's when this session gets pretty interesting for me, because I was I was battling, but I was card dead, so a lot of that was made up good hands.
You want to talk about something? Take you on to tilt, and then really, so it kind of limps. Was it limped or raised to me?
It was limped.
It was limped. Mm-hmm. So limped. I'm on. Was it limped?
I mean, I would assume. I mean, would it matter?
I don't know. Okay, so it was either like limped or small raise. It comes down. I have 3-6 suited. I mean, here's the thing: is when you're like, I think I had one like 300, was sitting at 600, but I had dwindled back down to like 300. And I'm like, well, I thought about playing this, and I actually reached over from chips to play, and then I was like, well, if I'm playing this, I mean, this is not a profitable call when you're only got 100 blinds.
Definitely not. Yeah.
So I was like, I got to be more disciplined. I fold it. It flips over both cards while I'm folding it, and everybody sees 3-6 suited. Everybody's like, well, they're like, oh my god, that's too tight. You should be playing that and everything. I'm like, well, I
know I'm at a good game.
Yeah, no kidding. So I'm like, it's not profitable, whatever. Well, this not profitable play, the flop immediately comes 4-5-7.
Yep.
And of course, everybody's looking at me like I am the world's biggest jackass. This dude is not arguing with them because he feels like the world's biggest jackass right now. So I'm like, oh god. I mean, it was one of those sessions where it was kind of grindy. I had gone up, now back down, and kind of needed a big hand, and then to flop the absolute. I mean, basically the effective nuts.
Yeah.
I mean, outside of 6-8, I mean, I was like, oh god. But it's like not too much action on the flop, I think. It was like a bet and a call. But he eventually ends up like on a gigantic bet and re-raise as the board pairs on the river. I mean, I think the guy 2 to my left made it like 125, and the other guy made it like 275 or something.
I thought a little bit more than that. I thought more like 375. It was gigantic. I remember thinking
big.
It was a gigantic bet, and I was thinking Clint just saved his whole stack here.
Yeah, because I mean, on that board pairing river, I mean, it definitely seems like that guy had a boat. So, definitely seems like I might have. And I think on that player in particular, I might have to call. But, like, I think that player does call down light, but he doesn't. But I haven't seen him put too many big bluffs in, so it might be. Whatever it was, I'm kind of glad I was out of the hand.
Oh, I'm very confident that you have the lesser hand in that situation.
Yeah. So, it was, I mean, ended up, I think, saving me a ton on something that yeah. Because, I mean, he was not the type of player, like me and you talked about, he's not folding on the, because if he has 2 pair set, he's never going anywhere anyways.
Yeah, so he might jam you all in if he has flopped a set because he's not assuming that you're playing 6-8 or 3-6.
Right. So that was kind of a weird. Talk about like feel like the world's biggest idiot, and then feel like you just got saved at the river.
Yeah, I was thinking, man, I was happy for you because at first I was like, ooh, that's rough for him.
I mean, you can't be super results oriented on that one hand, but it's hard not to be when you really need that hand.
And it's one thing if you're the one who knows, but when everyone knows, it's kind of tough.
Yeah, if there's ever a hand I didn't want to flip over, it's got to be that hand.
And then you left kind of shortly after that, right?
Yeah, it was one of those that I had just dwindled back to about even, and, well, I worked 18 hours that Saturday, so it was just a matter of time on when I was going to go, and I was like, I really don't want to. It's already not great. I've been kind of in some really kind of rough spots, just missing and everything else. So I decided to pack it up and call it good. But at that point, you were running pretty well. Like, I mean, you started out like it did not look good for you because it was that ace-jack hand. But at that point, it seemed like you were kind of hammering the table a little bit.
Well, the problem is that King 4 Lucky Hand bluff took a gigantic stack out of my stack. So when you left, I was just about even.
Were you even? It seemed like you had like, what were you in for then?
1,000.
Oh, were you in for 1,000?
Yeah.
Is that what you sit down with?
Yeah.
Okay, well, I just didn't notice you had that much to start with. Well, you did lose a lot on the first hand, so
Yeah.
I probably wasn't paying that much attention. And, when you lose that much in the first couple of hands, I look back and just figured that's your buy-in. I mean...
Yeah, not the first couple, the first hand.
Yeah, so it was... Yeah, okay. I kind of get that then. I honestly thought you were just killing it at that point, but I did not think you were even. I thought you were up like 300 or 400 at that point.
Nope, just about even. It was kind of floating at even. I'd go up a little bit, down a little bit, but probably neither $100 either way.
Okay, I had seen you take down some pretty sizable hands with just either where you didn't show or...
I had that one where an ace made the nut straight and a 9 made the second nut straight, and I bet gigantic and he called. I mean, if there was ever someone who felt like a complete fool, was me not jamming. I mean, if he's calling that gigantic bet, he's calling it all in.
I mean, in his... At first, I was like, how in the world does this dude call here? Because, I mean, it's not like it's a 5 that makes the bigger straight. It's an ace.
Yeah.
But the way... I mean, it seemed like you were betting freaking everything.
It didn't seem that way. I was.
Okay. Well, I mean, in that case, I mean, if you've got, the 9 here, and you're just... It seems like you're re-raising every single time. Sorry, it does not seem. You're re-raising every single time.
There we go.
Yeah. Then, at some point... You have to call at some point. I mean, you have on your range. So, yeah, you could have probably made even more. I don't know how much you could have made, but that dude will call kind of light sometimes. So I think you could have made quite a bit.
Well, and this was after that King 4 hand, and he benefited off of that. And I mean, it's hard to hold on to kings there on that flop. Queen 3, bet get re-raised.
I mean, it is, again, I mean, it is, but at the same time, I don't know, against you and the way you were playing that night, there's going to be some time where you have to hold on. I mean, otherwise, is he going to fold every time that he doesn't have the nuts when you're just slamming the table every time?
I wonder if he folds to a river jam there. Oh, well. I guess we'll phone a friend.
Yeah. Well, let me answer and ask him what he would do. Yeah, I don't know. He might have. I mean, you definitely can't have a queen there. I mean, it wasn't like it was trip 3s out there, which you can also have a 3 there. We've seen that happen before. Right. But I mean, there's a lot of queens you could have here, but I don't know. You were pretty aggressive. I think folding kings there is... It's a tough situation. I don't know, because there were not that many draws on the board either.
Yeah, I know. That was the point.
So, yeah.
That's why I was hoping he would fold the turn.
I mean, there's a certain point where you're only beating a bluff. I mean, that being said, it seemed like at that night you had like 85% bluffs in your range. But you definitely should put somebody in a really difficult spot there.
Yeah, he passed. But so here's where the hands start getting interesting, though. That King 4 stuff, boring. This is where it gets interesting.
Oh, God.
So you leave, and I'm in the big blind with 7-3 of diamonds. Limps around. I'm just whatever. Like, oh, free flop? Check, whatever. Flop comes 3-3-3 for flopped quads. I'm already like, how am I going to get any sort of money in this hand, right?
Yeah, because, I mean, me and you talked about it, because not only do you flop quads, that's great, but there's no draws. I mean, there's no really boats, because, I mean, it was a limp pot. I mean,
And
most
the
people are going
pot's
to raise
so
pairs.
small.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is great, but, I mean, you're never getting action here.
So the first guy just bets out 10.
Nice.
And then I kind of do like the, sure, call the 10. The next guy raises to 50. The next guy, who hasn't put $1 in the pot, calls the 50. The original $10 better folds. I call the 50, going 3 ways. The turn was a 10. I check from the big blind. The original guy who made it 50 bets 50 again, and the next guy calls the 50. And I'm thinking, is now the time to spring the trap or not yet?
I kind of like the call here, actually.
I put the call in. The river is a king. So I check it over to him. The original aggressor checks it.
That hurts.
The guy who's been calling along the whole time puts half his stack in.
Oh, what a godsend.
I jam. The next guy folds. This guy calls instantly for his whole stack and loses.
I mean, I love the way you played it. And I mean, like I say, this is very exploitative. It's not like what you would normally do, like poker theory. But I think I probably donk lead the river.
I was thinking about it.
I mean, it's such a disaster if it goes check.
Yeah, but I was counting on him. I mean,
yeah.
Whenever someone's re-raced flop and then someone flatted behind, I was thinking, and I was also thinking this could just be someone hitting the king a lot of the time.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, me and you talked about it. I don't know of any hands that make sense here whatsoever. I can't put anybody on anything at this point.
The guy who called his whole stack, he ran away. But the guy who raised originally had pocket nines.
Pocket nines on a limp pot?
It's a good game.
I mean, I don't know. I mean, we need to just do a podcast where you teach us how to do game selection at this point. If he has pocket nines here, this is a disaster for him. I mean, if he raises, even you are not.
I mean, I was messing around on my phone.
Yeah,
after I saw 3-7.
Yeah, you're folding here, and he's taking it with a boat. I mean, the other guy. Maybe he hit the king on the... I don't know. It was very hard to put anybody on any of those hands at that point. So, wow.
That was an interesting one.
That is the most of interesting. I just don't... like I say, flopping quads and then getting the action versus what was done pre-flop is just almost insane. One of the weirdest things I've heard.
So... that hand was big, but I was about to leave, and then I busted that guy, and I was like, well, if I leave, the game's gonna break. And I told him, I was like, guys, I really kind of got to leave relatively soon, Oh man, I didn't even talk about. Well, we have some other hands we need to talk about too, but I'll finish this and then we'll go back to it. then one of his friends comes, or someone he knows maybe. Guy must have been super drunk or something. I had king 9 offsuit. Flop came 9-9-3. I bet, and he raises. And I call. And then on the turn, which was like maybe a deuce, he donked into me. So first he check raised. Now he donks into me for almost his entire stack. I go all in. He calls with 10-3 for just a 2 pair with 10s and 3s. Oh, sorry, 9s and 3s.
Good Lord.
And I just stack him. So now the game's even shorter hand. I mean, and then I just stay there for a while. And then eventually I end up, after those few hands, I end up being up quite a bit for like a $800 and something session.
I mean, the hands you are, I don't know. I mean, it's almost unfair. I mean, with the way that people are playing against you, it's just, it's almost highway theft on what you're doing here. I mean, I don't know. If someone's doing this with 10-3, and someone's not raising pocket 9s, this whole live poker's dead. Definitely not at lower stakes. Nobody who's saying that has been to Texas at all.
You just got to show up. But okay, so it's a longer topic, but we'll end it with this at least. We have one interesting hand and one interesting situation. We'll start with the hand. Okay. I have pocket aces, and I raise pretty big pre-flop. Heads up to the flop.
What is pretty big pre-flop?
It's probably like 30.
30? Okay.
Yeah, 30 to 25. Okay. Yeah.
Gotcha.
And a deep stack calls.
Okay.
The flop comes jack high. But it's like jack 8-7 or something. And I bet pretty big again because there's a flush draw and he calls. And I'm like, oh, this is perfect. He has like ace jack. Something like that maybe.
This is definitely something you're definitely betting.
The turn is like a 9. So I was like, ooh, this isn't great.
That is not, no.
But I'm not going to give up quite yet until I'm told otherwise, right? So I kind of down bet this turn. And then the river, he calls, the river made it to where the board was, any queen made a straight. So it was jack, 10, 9, 8, and any 7 made a straight. Right?
Yeah, okay.
And then he bets into me.
I think this is just a complete fold.
Yeah. So I end up laying it down.
I think this is a good fold. I think, me and you talked about it because it's like, I called it a standard fold, I think, but it's never easy to fold pocket aces. But for outside of straights, there's just so many 2 pairs and everything right here. When, jack, it was 8, what was it, 8, 9, 10 jack?
Yeah.
So any 7, any queen, but also, 8, 9, 8, 10, jack 10, jack 9. You're just running out of hands that would call a big raise that you have beat here.
Well, I wasn't going to raise, but I painfully folded to his bet.
Yeah. That's a tough one, but I think it's a very good fold.
But he showed queen jack of hearts.
Queen jack, so yeah, the straight. Yeah.
So then I was like, oh, man. I appreciate you showing. So I threw him $5.
Mm-hmm.
And he just threw it back. He was like, whatever. And he's like, don't worry about it. All right, cool.
Okay.
And this kind of leads into the other interesting situation. And then there was a hand. I don't remember what.
Wait, okay. So, because I think I know the situation coming. Did he say anything when he bet and you were
No.
He didn't?
No.
Okay. I was just double checking.
Yep. So then I play another hand with the same guy. And I'm about to hero call with 4th pair. A big bet on a bricked out river. Like the front door flush missed. I didn't really put him on any of these low cards that had hit.
Okay.
And I was like, I think sometimes I'm good here, and he's bluffing this spot. Because that guy was bluffing quite a bit.
Was he? Okay.
Yeah. And I'm sitting there humming and hawing, and he says, how about you just let me take this one? You can take the next one. And I've known in live poker that normally just means they have a very good hand.
Yeah.
And he said that, I snap fold, he shows pocket kings.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so I was like, ooh, man, that guy, I was about to, he didn't realize how light I was about to pay him off. I mean, because I was pretty sure I was about to call, and then he told me, like, hey, you shouldn't call. I was like, okay. So I really, I mean, any dollar helped, especially at that point in the session where I was about break even.
Right.
And then this interesting hand happened where I end up with like 6-9 and flop a gut shot versus him.
I mean, nature of playing 6-9 a lot.
Drill the gut shot.
Nature of being Tyler.
Yeah. So, and he bets into me. And
that's beautiful.
And I was like, oh, God. I would feel... Is the word unjust or just... It just doesn't feel right.
Because, I mean, he had helped you out earlier in the session.
Exactly. So I told him, I'm going to raise, but you were nice to me earlier. I'll be nice to you now. You should fold.
I like this. I mean, me and you've talked about this, and this is not in your kind of MO of something you would normally do, but I have had some table dynamics where not every time, but every now and then, that present themselves, and I like how you handled the situation.
Yeah, and he folded pocket queens and overpair on a board that would have made no sense for me to have a straight.
I mean,
just drilling a random gut shot seemed like a hard thing to rep. It seemed like a pretty easy thing to call down with queens. I mean, if someone's repping a random gut shot, it's kind of...
Oh, yeah. I mean, yeah. You're
getting at least one call.
I mean, it's an interesting dynamic because, like, I've done it before, but there's also the times like this is the exact reason you kind of avoid it. Yeah,
because, if I still folded the aces, and it was nice to show me, but I still folded those, and I would have only lost... The amount I would have lost hero calling was way less than about 1/3 of what I would have made stacking them there.
Yeah. So, kind of the reason to avoid that situation, but it's I don't know, it's a tough dynamic. Because, where I am at, where I'm playing with the same players all the time, it's really a tough dynamic when you're playing for profit versus just playing to have a good time.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
To a degree, they look at you kind of like you're a dick. Nobody, doesn't like you or has an issue, but they kind of look at you as,
you're raising the pots.
Exactly.
You're bluffing in spots where it puts them in a hard spot.
Exactly. They're kind of, they're there just to kill time and kind of, have some fun and not play a lot of times not play the bigger pots, just, kind of chase flush draws for the minimum and stuff like that. And if I'm there, raising it and doing the pre-flop raise to 15 every time I'm in the pot and all that, it's kind of a different dynamic when you're, it's just, it is what it is. Like I say, I always try to have a good time and be respectful of people at the table, so nobody has an issue there. But it can be tough sometimes.
The real move is say that and then show 7 deuce for nothing.
Oh God, that would have been horrible. But I like how you handled this. I thought, it's when someone does something like this, I think it's a good way to go about it. And you know what? He was just as likely to. He saved you money. He saved you money when you could have called. So it's
yeah,
good.
it just didn't feel right to. But here's the issue: if you're going to hit gut shots, and you're going to pay to hit the gut shot, it's horribly unprofitable not to get the implied odds. But this is kind of a one-off situation. Not a one-off, but a very specific, special situation.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, maybe the lesson on this one would be if you're in a game with someone like that where you have that dynamic, you just don't pay for like a draw where you're not gonna you're not gonna make them pay the maximum.
Well, it was one of those hands where whenever we were on the flop, I didn't think he was that strong.
Right.
And then once he bet gigantic on that turn when I drilled the gut shot,
then you realize.
All of a sudden I'm like, this is going to be a massive. I mean, this is going to be one where we go all in, basically.
But that's still the same. That's still the same point, though. If you don't think he's that strong, when you called the gut shot, I mean, you might not have gotten the implied odds to actually go for it.
True. I forgot how I ended up with the gut shot.
Or shit, maybe you thought he was so weak that your 6 or 9 was good too. I don't know.
I don't remember how the exact hand was. I just remember thinking like it would be kind of maybe immoral to stack him there after he was so nice to me multiple times. And then he told me what he had in the hand with you, so I could tell you what he had. Whatever, yeah. So
it was okay. Yeah, that's I think it was a good way to handle that situation. So it's I mean it's cool because it brings up a lot of points on like not maybe avoiding the dynamic, but again, like it's gonna save you. It's gonna cost you money sometimes when you have that dynamic, and it's gonna save you money sometimes.
Well, and here's the other thing: I've had that dynamic with some people before, where we're friendly. But we're friendly, but we are trying to stack each other every hand.
Yeah,
I've had that with a few people. I mean, still have that with a few people. We're like, I'll say hi, whatever. But any given hand, there's no soft playing at all. I mean, you're going to try to stack me, I'm going to try to stack you.
Well, I think that's what I kind of shoot for. Because, like I say, when I say you're playing for profit and everybody's like, it's a different world kind of, then you're still I'm still friendly. I mean, I'm still friendly with everybody at the table. And, just because you're playing for money, I mean, everybody's there to compete and to risk the same. I mean, it's not that I'm trying to take anybody's money, but that's the game.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
I mean, most of the people I play with, I like a whole hell of a lot. I mean, but, that's... I mean, if we're not going to play and do it competitively...
Why play?
Yeah, I mean, shit, let's break out Sorry or something, or Risk or something. I mean, that's kind of the nature of the game.
Well, on that note, this concludes episode 31 of the Texas Poker Podcast. We'll see you next week.
That was the Texas Poker Podcast. Go ahead and rack up, add time, and we'll see you next week.